what's going on, everybody? I thought, since it's Special League, maybe the first thing we should do before I rerun everything is go over my builds for last season. So let's talk about it. Here are all of my unit builds for Season 21 of RTA. First thing I want to talk about is there was a transition period where I kind of changed the types of drafts I was running. So at the beginning of the season, I was running Swift Verde, and then I kind of ran the Control Cleave with no Swift Verde. And then at the end of the season, I just transitioned to all over Sekhmet at the end. So basically, I'll go through what the core picks were for me throughout the season, and then we'll go into the counter picks afterwards. So the biggest core pick, and what I actually built my entire account around, was this unit right here. So Gina 2A was the unit that I built my whole account around. And the reason it was her was because she had the lowest base speed of all the strippers that I had. So what I did was I put my fastest set on her. I gave her the highest accuracy, and then focused on all additionals because her attacks, her skill 3 hits 4 times. So there was a lot of value in getting additional damage in that sense. So Gina was my basically the hardest point for me to build, right? Low base speed stripper. Obviously strippers want to go first. So building Gina was number 1. After Gina, my thoughts in order were basically, okay, what is the best strip chance? You know, what are my 100% harmful effect rate strippers? What are the strippers that I need to go first for certain situations? What are the unsafe strippers into like a triple revenge Verde, for example? So I decided to do my Water Ryu next. So my Water Ryu, I built off will. Higher base speed made him a lot easier to build, so he didn't necessarily need to take away really incredible runes from anyone else. And I really wanted to focus on the high attack so that I had enough damage, or I had enough attack to basically not glance Fire Ryu whenever it came up. So I went speed attack on this build, and I have mostly additional damage by attack. And the reason I went additional damage by attack is because attack goes up over time. Speed is more consistent, but because of the artifacts that I had available, I really ended up just going with additional damage by attack because I wanted the 80% accuracy for skill 2. So with my Water Ryu, it's not the perfect build. It could use a little bit more accuracy. If I could get 23 more accuracy and then run all additional damage, that would be ideal. But overall, I would lose a lot of attack, HP, and defense to do that. So I felt like for me, it wasn't worth it. So after Water Ryu, the next units that I built for strippers was actually Jeogun. And so the reason I like Jeogun after the other two is because if Jeogun goes after the other two and the enemy's quad will, it gives him the opportunity to use skill 2 first, if you want to put something away right away. Otherwise, just go right in with that skill 3. So for my Jeogun, I did go attack increasing effect as well as accuracy on artifacts. But I ended up running a resist slot 6 on him because I find a lot of people target Jeogun, and I wanted to bait that out. I didn't want to run a high attack Jeogun, high damage Jeogun, so I actually ran a tankier one with high resist, knowing that people generally target the Jeogun down. So after Jeogun, a lot of you guys would look at my box and be like, oh, it's definitely Cheongpung next, right? Like it has to be Cheongpung next. It wouldn't make sense any other way. But I believe next is actually my Josephine. I think my Josephine moves in front of my Sagar by a little bit. So Josephine I actually ran really fast. And the reason I ran my Josephine really fast is because if I picked Josephine and Oliver together, or Josephine and Seara, or anything like that, I needed to make sure that my Josephine was able to strip before one of those units moved. And in general, I wasn't really using my Josephine against super high resist units, not bringing it into Riley and bringing it into like damage dealers or control cleavers. So running high accuracy wasn't a necessity for me. So my Josephine's on speed crit rate HP with 100 crit. And then I went with mostly crit damage artifacts. But I think that in hindsight, I would have liked a little bit more accuracy. Maybe like 60% would have been a little more comfortable. But overall, my accuracy breakpoints are generally 25, 40, and then 85. 25 is good against people with resist awakens. 40 is good against people with no resistance and a resistance leader. And then 85 is good versus everything. So those were the breakdowns for me. Overall, I was pretty happy with the Josephine build, but I definitely think there could have been more adjustments. I do really like Nemesis, especially since I never pick Josephine into enemy Oliver. So I don't really need to have Will. I like Nemesis because she gets targeted, and since you're provoking units, if you don't have the shield up, you take some damage, you get a little bit of attack bar anyway, so you'd cycle faster. I didn't actually talk about this yet because I want to go over it with my Swift units, but we'll talk about Haegang when I get to Swift units. The next unit in order for me when it comes to units that strip, etc., is actually going to be Sagar. So some of you may wonder, you know, why did you choose to put your M Bison or your Sagar before your Cheongpung? The reason for this is because I run so many strippers in my drafts when I am playing that kind of control cleave style that I found it was more valuable to run all of the strippers that have either 100% harmful effect rate, which means that they always go to accuracy resist check, with the exception of Water Ryu, before my Cheongpung, because Cheongpung's skill 2 strip is only 75%. Right? So 75% harmful effect rate, and then it goes to accuracy resist. So my logic on that is basically, I'm not treating my Cheongpung as a stripper. I'm treating my Cheongpung as a skill 3 control unit, right? If my Bison goes after 3 or 4 other strippers, even after 1 other stripper, right? The chance for 2 units to still have immunity, somewhat low. The chance for 1 unit to have immunity, fairly high. So M Bison really stops that, right? The skill 3 is a strip into cooldown resets and then a full team attack bar pushback plus provoke. So I wanted to run him on the highest accuracy that I could, give him some HP and defense. I'm on speed, defense, HP here. I think in a perfect world, I go speed, HP, but obviously, you know, the flexibility of the runes when you're trying to go this fast is a little bit tough. And I actually went full additional damage by speed. In hindsight, I think that stat proportional to lost HP, like defense and HP and speed proportional to lost HP might be okay on M Bison, but overall, I don't feel like any artifacts are like incredibly good, right? Because if you're not running crit rate or crit damage, everything kind of just feels okay. Damage delta element feels okay. Additional damage just feels okay. I think minus damage might be really good, but I don't find a lot of people target the Sagar first. He kind of just gets left there, and they try to like cycle around the fact that you might not have, you know, enough control. So Sagar is next, and then we have our boy, Mr. Two-Piece himself, the Chungus. So on my Chungus, I went speed, HP, accuracy. I needed to get that max accuracy since I want debuffs on all 3 skills. Full additional damage by speed. Very, very focused on the damage there. Nothing super special. He still does move in front of the other control units, just in case, you know, he is the only one who gets through as the stripper. You know, I make a bad draft or something like that. But there's my Cheongpung in order. So after that, I think in the early season, I think the only other units that I ran would have been Charlotte. So my Charlotte in a perfect world would be 85 accuracy, but I really wanted high attack as well as being tanky. So I went speed, attack, HP, and full additional damage by speed and attack. I think it'd be better if I had max accuracy since her harmful effect rates are really good on skill 3, right? They're maxed out on skill 3. Skill 2, they're maxed out as well. So the value there could have been really big. And then Poseidon. Poseidon was the other unit that I was using. I really, really value the accuracy on him as well. So I spent speed, crit rate, HP. Then I have 20% accuracy on skill 3 and then plus damage to wind. So there were 2 other units I had built in the season, and both of them moved actually before Poseidon and Charlotte. I used to have a Luer on violent, speed, attack, max accuracy. That was really good when Douglas was really popular. It was really good into Molly as well because it doesn't glance on skill 3. It's good into Ragdoll. But there were a lot of really good opportunities using that Luer. And the other unit that I used, I can't quite remember. I want to say it was Izaria, but I didn't really use her that much. I only really used her when I like really, really needed an answer to like Verde Douglas. But for the most part, that was like the main focus of the control cleave that I was running. After that, we saw the balance patch. So we saw changes to Shizuka. We saw changes to Tomoe. We actually saw an Oliver nerf and a Masha change. But the really big shift for me was that I ended up going away from Swift Verde. So my Swift Verde was plus 216 speed with plus 1.4k attack. But I just felt like there were a lot of base speed units out there that were really abusing it. So it didn't feel good enough to use a Verde at that speed unless I was running something like Obabo's speeds where I'm like plus, you know, 223 or something like that, which I can do now, but I couldn't do at the beginning of the season. So it wasn't worth it for me. So the secondary set of drafts I made was basically the concept of running Oliver and Sekhmet. Now, the reason I ran Oliver into Sekhmet was because there's so much flexibility with these 2 units, right? Sekhmet can contest Swift units. She has a strip to set up Oliver, and she also rotates her cooldowns really fast. Oliver's a 33% speed lead with control, and if you have AoE control, it's usually 2 units on first turn. If not, it's guaranteed 1 unit. There's a lot of pressure when it comes to using this that you can kind of change, right? So if you go Oliver Sekhmet, you have the option to go double speed lead with the Water Ryu. If you're like me, you have the option to just Swift Chase with Barbara. You can really like aggress people with speed. If you want to play it slower and safer, you know, if they take a Gina or something, you have options like Shizuka. You can take Water Monkey King. You can take Josephine. There's a lot of flexibility from that because you have speed lead, double resets, and a strip. So you can kind of go in whatever direction you want. You can play aggressive turn 1. You can play it very single target control-y, right? You can actually just bring in damage and snipe people out. So for me, the turn order ended up being Haegang on Swift. So So I put my Haegang on Swift, speed, attack, accuracy, and plus damage to fire, additional damage by speed. I wanted to be able to kill Douglas. I wanted to be able to kill Verde and Juno. So Haegang was in there with the higher attack. I didn't actually run Despair on my Haegang because I ran out of Despair runes. So I thought if I ran him on Swift, he would still be fairly effective. And if he's fast enough, I might actually, you know, people will boost, Haegang will cut. And even though the enemy team will still be able to move, they won't necessarily have a cleanse or a way to deal with the glancing debuff. So it's still decently good value. So my orders for turns after that were basically Shi Hou. Shi Hou is really effective for me because the strip is so consistent, right? Every time you crit, you have a chance to strip. You hit 6 times, which is pretty insane, and they buffed him to give 2 turns of invincibility instead of only 1 turn of invincibility. Overall for Shi Hou, I just ran full additional by speed and attack. I gave him my absolute best artifacts because so many hits and it's so consistent. You're rotating turns on skill 2. You have high base speed. So he was a good stripper for me. Very good single target speed stripper. With the high base speed, he ends up moving before a lot of units. I actually think I put him a little bit too fast. I was a bit lazy on the tuning when I built him. My power was out, so I was just kind of like building things and just, you know, playing it by feel. So I had Shi Hou. I also built my Molong, so I went for a Vampire Molong. The Vampire Molong for me was because I needed a snipe option, right? If people were running like Ragdoll Pontos, Ragdoll Lima into me, I needed the ability to either like ban out the Lima, snipe a unit, or ban out the Ragdoll, snipe a unit. So this was what Molong was for me. I think instead of running additional damage by HP and speed, I probably should have just focused on going damage dealt to specific element, whether it was light, dark, fire, or wind. But I ended up just going with this. It worked out well. The Molong was good, but overall it could have been a little bit better, could have been a little more efficient. Other notable units for me, I built my Seara really fast. She did absolutely nothing for me ever. She missed every bomb. She was depressing. I just stopped picking her. I just stopped picking her. Seara's just not for me. As much as I want to use Seara, she's just genuinely not for me. And that's okay. I accept that. I accept that there's sometimes units that just aren't for you. So this one was a fun one for me. I ended up building my Tomoe just a little bit slower than the team. So for the beginning part of the season when I was using her after her buff, I didn't realize that Karma stripped. A lot of the time I'd be going into matches like skill 1ing instead of skill 2ing. And don't ask me why. I was dumb, but she's great. Secondary speed lead, strip into skill 2, plus the 100% attack bar gain is really nice. You can pop that into the skill 3. I ran Despair just for the extra chances to get, you know, lucky stuns here and there. And I felt like her rotations didn't necessarily need her to be on Violent. So it was good to use like the extra runes that I had available and just pop those on her. After that, I believe I didn't really use my Nana. She exists, but I rarely ever picked her. And when I did, she almost always got banned. So I didn't really want to talk about it too much. She is speed tuned to be faster than most of my units. She defense breaks for them. She used to be fast enough to defense break for all of the damage units like Poseidon and what's the other one? And Charlotte, but I slowed her down to put her on Revenge to give the will runes elsewhere. She ended up being like one of those setups where like I was picking Riley with Nana most of the time, and I didn't really find it that necessary, so I didn't focus too much on the runes. The next set that were really key for Violent runes, Tesarion. So Tesarion, after getting speed scaling buff on skill 2, I don't think actually needs crit damage anymore. Tesarion's scaling on speed is absolutely incredible. The amount of damage you deal based on passive, the amount of damage you reduce based on passive is nuts. For mine, I went minus fire because I really didn't want him to die to anything. I didn't want him to die to like a Fire Ryu, to a Verde, to whatever people were willing to bring into my Tesarion. I think in hindsight, I might have preferred minus dark or minus water so that I can't be sniped out by Molongs. But yeah, reducing damage, even if it's just from Juno, reducing chip damage is pretty nice. And then getting that like 50% accuracy range to 45 breakpoint was good enough. He was good enough. He was speed tuned, and I was happy with how he turned out. His damage is incredible. So overall, great unit. All right, the next two great ones to talk about, Masha. So Masha is incredible in this season. Masha was incredible for a couple of reasons. One, she's very hard to kill. She has great base stats. Two, because of Oliver, Water Ryu, Cheongpung, there's so many units that reduce attack bar. She ends up gaining her stacks incredibly fast, so she can outpace people, right? And three, people totally underrated how good every turn immunity is. When this unit came out on the balance patch, I was like, this is huge. This is a huge buff. Masha's going to be so good against this. And she was. She was good enough that in Legend Tournament, she got picked first a couple times. She got picked second a lot of the time. But she's incredible. You can run her on Will, you can run her on Nemesis, you can run her really fast, you can run her like fairly slow. Like this is what I would consider fairly slow on the bruiser side. You know, I'm missing like maybe 200 defense for this to be like a really strong bruiser, but 200 and 251 speed is still a fast unit, right? And then you gain 75% speed from your passive. You know, if you're running a Masha at like 280, 290, you're still getting 75% speed. Like you're dealing so much damage when there's no Leo on the field that it's pretty incredible. And then you also have that secondary life, right? When you get dismounted, you increase your attack, you lower your HP and your speed. You still deal so much damage. So for me, I ran plus wind. I think a lot of people actually very effectively ran minus damage on their Mashas. You know, the longer the Masha lives, the more damage she deals naturally. So that was a pretty effective one as well. I really like the concept of Nemesis on Masha. And I didn't really use Tableau ever. I rarely ever used Leo. I rarely ever used John, but he is ruined. Just, you know, attack HP, 29% bomb damage. He's just like a truck. That's all he is. Feng was a counter pick for me. It was a decent option. Is speed, defense, HP, I believe. And this is basically just the... If I kill one unit on their team, they'll never kill Feng. I'm just going to pick him because he's either a force ban or he's going to be a free win. So you end up getting speed additionals, defense additionals, and then plus wind, plus water. And then I also got lucky with the bonus life drain. So, you know, it never hurts. Juno and Karnal were both built really slow. I rarely ever picked them. Juno's on speed career 8 HP, and then Karnal's on speed HP. I had them as options when I was struggling against Oliver at first, but I felt like with the way I had them ruined, it wasn't working out well enough, and I valued the other units I had more, so I didn't actually give them that much love. I did pick them once in a while when I needed something slower, tanky, really hard turn 2, but for the most part, it was not a popular pick for me. Rakan and Ken were both on Violent Nem and Vamp Nem. These are my anti-Leo units. Both of them got used a couple times. Ken got a good win. Rakan got 2 or 3 good wins. But overall, they were kind of whatever units. Rakan here with plus damage to light, plus crit damage, plus attack increasing effect. And then Ken was basically all crit damage. Just a ton of crit damage on artifacts. Skill 3 accuracy. Other counter picks, Abellio. So when I look at Abellio, I'm actually running speed, crit damage, defense. A lot of the time I look for 85 crit and then 130 crit damage. You can find whatever other stats you want after that. Minimum speed I like on Abellio is plus 120. Minimum defense plus 1,000. And then I like stacking more HP. So 25k HP is okay. 30k HP is really good on Abellio. 35k HP is incredibly good on Abellio. The reason I like the HP is because it makes it harder to snipe him out, right? When he drops below 40, he gets 100% attack bar, but if you violent proc and you can kill him in that turn, he loses a lot of value, right? So with Abellio, if you're tankier, you end up getting a lot of value out of the support side of you. You get less damage from not having as much defense, but overall, I think the survivability is important. I went minus wind and then plus recovery, kind of just standard stuff. Minus water is also really good. And then in terms of the last couple picks here, I did not show my Oliver properly. So my Oliver is just speed, HP, tanky. I had him on speed career HP at first, and I didn't end up liking it at all. He's minus fire, plus additionals. I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do with him. You know, right side artifacts don't really feel that great unless you have 3 equally split artifacts for accuracy. So I just felt like speed proportional loss HP, additional damage is probably going to work well enough. So we ended up doing that. Leo, usual Leo stuff, Violent Revenge for me. Rarely ever pick Leo. Antares, Despair Revenge, also rarely ever pick Antares. Additional damage by attack is really good on Antares though. Really popular artifact setups. And then I think the last units to talk about would be Minato and then our Swift units. So Minato, I actually had a lot of fun with Minato. I recently put out some videos with Minato, and I'll also be putting out my last day of RTA wings, where you'll see Minato has a couple great matches in there. You can check it out. But I really liked Life Drain, I really liked Crit Damage, and I really liked that Skill 2 accuracy. Getting that closer to like 40% was kind of value to me. I noticed I was hitting a couple defense breaks on 100 resist units, and I was feeling really good about it. All right, the last thing to go over, Swift units. So Swift units, I got Barbara, speed, crit damage, attack. Barbara helps me speed contest really well because high base speed. So even though she's only 322, she can still contest against things like Eschers. She can still contest against things like Sekhmet, as long as you understand like where the lead sits, right? With the way people draft, you can tell whether or not somebody's being really aggressive because they're confident in their speeds, or they're timid and they're not confident in their speeds, right? Those are the times when you can kind of pressure them with extra leads, or you can pressure them by banning a certain lead. For me, big plus fire fan, I really like the one-shot potential on Verde. I prefer crit damage as enemies' HP is more because, it stacks with first turn better. So if I skill 3 or skill 2 into a fire unit, I now have 29% crit damage, hopefully one-shot them. If I skill 2, it's actually even more. It's 34% crit damage bonus, and then plus 15 to fire. In a perfect world, I would like 14 more crit, but I think that overall I'm just happy with my Barber the way she is, and I just want more speed. Other units I used to contest, I have Escher. I built my Escher on speed, defense, resistance. I know I lose a lot of damage by not going crit rate or HP, with full additionals, but I actually found a lot of the time people were targeting Escher, so having that 100 resist was kind of nice, actually. If people are speed chasing me and running damage, their damage dealers never debuff Escher, so he ends up living for a lot longer than he should. So in this case, I just ran full additional damage by speed, a little bit by HP. In a perfect world, that would also be recovery skill 2 instead of skill 3, but we can't all have amazing artifacts. And then Sekhmet was my last build. So Sekhmet, very specifically, the reason I built her on 215 instead of pushing faster or slower is because at 215, it's really, 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 really unlikely that a Gina or any 100 base speed unit will ever outspeed me if I have 24 lead and they have 33. So the reason I did this is because I watched a replay of a friend who has a plus 214 Sekhmet, and all of her lead Gianna outsped the Seara lead Sekhmet, and I was like, this guy I think has a plus 229 Gianna. And I looked at that, I was like, that is absolutely nuts. But how many players realistically would have that? So I was thinking, okay, if I can outspeed that guy, I can probably outspeed everyone who's doing something similar to that. So that was the reason why I chose to go 215 instead of going for 220 and slowing someone else down, or going slower at like 210 and spreading the runes around a little bit more. I also really like accuracy on Nemesis on Sekhmet. I see a lot of value in people targeting her. So more turns, more damage output, more rotation of skill 3, more buff stolen, more rotation of skill 2. And then for Sekhmet, it's definitely full additional damage by speed. She's super fast in that regard. She gets a lot of turns, and every time you rotate that skill 2, you're going to get a lot of extra damage. It really helps out at the end game too, when you're trying to like 1v1 a unit or 1v2 units. So overall, that's pretty much everything in my draft, guys. That was pretty much everything for the whole season. I did run Shizuka after everything. Shizuka plus the Water Monkey King was kind of fun because you get the 2 turns of invincibility in our whole team. But other than that, I don't think there's too much else. I did run a triple Revenge Verde at the end of the season, but rarely ever used it. So if you guys have any questions for me in this video, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you want me to lay this information out differently in the future, I'd be happy to hear your constructive criticism in that regard. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you do well in Special League.